This a great game or what? With the Hall of Famer Tim Kirkshin. I'm his son, Jeff Kirkshin, and today we have a Hall of Famer joining us. Not you, Dad. I mean, you're always joining us. But we have Tom Glavine, Hall of Fame baseball player who was also drafted in 1984 to play in the NHL. So we're going to talk to him about the NHL playoffs and so much more.
Right. We're going to talk hockey. We're going to talk golf. We're going to talk baseball. And few people that I have met in the game in the 45 years that I've covered are better speakers in a lot of ways than Tom Glavine. He is so smart. He is so articulate. He is so observant. And he explains things so beautifully. And again, he's explaining 3 different sports beautifully in this podcast. Can't wait for you to listen to this.
It's coming up. Tom Glavine on Is This a Great Game or What?
And our guest today is a very special one, Hall of Fame pitcher Tom Glavine, who was also the 69th overall pick in the 1984 NHL Draft. We're all over hockey this week. Tom, great to have you. This is my son, Jeff.
Well, it's good to be with you, Kirkshins, and looking forward to a very fun, lighthearted conversation.
Right. Tom, I understand you met my oldest brother, Andy, who's like a foot taller than me. He's way more handsome than me. He has a real adult human voice. Were you surprised to find out that was my brother?
Well, when I first heard the name, I was like, could it be? You know, because it's kind of like Glavine, right? There's not many of us, so when you hear that name, you're kind of like, could it? And sure enough, it was. And yeah, so unfortunately, he invited me to play in a tournament. I forget which one it was, and I think I was either doing a Braves that week or that weekend or whatever, so I couldn't play. But yeah, I run into him at the golf course every now and then. So yeah, small world.
Tom,
Right.
I have to say, we went down to that very golf course over Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's a couple years ago. Great course. But we played the old guys, which was like, you know, dads and my uncles and all that, against the young guys, which is the son-in-laws and the sons. And we played a scramble, right? And here we are, you know, we're young, we're spry, we're trying to put it off the deck. And Dad, how many shots did the young guys lose by?
Well, first off, Tom, the average age of the old guys was 66. The average age of the young guys was 29. And we were minus 11, and they were minus 2. We beat them by 9 shots in a scramble. And we're 30 years older than them on average.
See, Jeff, when I was your age, I would have thought they were the old guys too. Not so much anymore. You know, I mean, they're still young at heart, but no, that Santa Rosa Club is not a bomber's golf course. If you do not put it in the fairway, you are in a heap of trouble. So,
yeah,
short and straight is a very good game out there.
Let's just say my dad had Uncle Andy, a member of the course, and we had his son-in-law who's played it twice. So he was like, I think it's a dog leg left, but I'm not sure. And we said, we're dead. We're screwed.
Yeah, local knowledge definitely helps out there.
Absolutely. All right, Tom, we'll get back to golf in a minute. We'll get to baseball too, but it's the NHL season. And we'll be the first to tell you, Jeff and I don't know anything about hockey, but I am still mesmerized by the athleticism and by the playoffs. It's unbelievable. Just let's start with Alex Ovechkin. Tom, you were a great player. You were a center. You were a scorer. When you watch what this guy has done in his career and now broken the all-time goals record, what do you see when you watch him?
Well, I mean, obviously he's a guy with a ton of talent, right? And a guy who obviously takes care of himself, because to be able to play as long as he has in that game and break that record, I think says a lot. It says a lot about him and his work ethic and obviously the kind of player he is. I mean, I think almost to a certain degree, when you look around sports and you look at the unbreakable records, I think that was one of the ones that I think was on a lot of people's list that nobody thought would ever be broken, probably myself included. I just didn't think anybody would be able to play long enough to do that or have the talent, to do it. But Alex obviously has been that guy. But I think he's been fun. He's been fun the evolution of his game has been fun to watch. I mean, he's always been a scorer. But what I liked about him too was, he scored some goals, but he never was afraid to be physical. Wasn't afraid to drop the gloves. So to me, he was, kind of that whole package. And as he's gotten older, obviously the fighting has become much less a part of his game, although he's, still certainly not afraid to do it. But, I think anytime you get somebody in a sport that breaks a record that relies obviously on talent, but also on longevity, I mean, I think is just such a testament to that person. And, just again, the physicality of that game, knowing what's possible on any given day or any given year in terms of injuries, that, he's stayed largely healthy and been able to play for as long as he has at the level he has, I think is just, it's a testament to him and really unbelievable.
I mean, your draft class alone, 1984, is unbelievable when it comes to the names that are on there. And here you are, pick 69, and you end up going on to play baseball and become a Hall of Fame baseball pitcher. And there are Hall of Famers you were drafted ahead of.
Yeah, so my standard line there is, and clearly I would have been a Hall of Fame hockey player had I gone that route. But yeah, I think one of the things that makes me feel old is, if I'm not mistaken, I think Sidney Crosby's dad was in that draft too. So
Wow.
that kind of shows you where things have gone. But no, it was a very talented class, and trust me, anytime I run across Brett Hull or Luc Robitaille, I remind those guys I was drafted ahead of them. But look at it. I loved hockey. If you'd asked me, I shouldn't say that. When people ask me, in high school, hey, what's your favorite sport? It always depended on what season I was in. If it was baseball, it was baseball. If it was hockey, it was hockey. But I think honestly, I probably had a little bit more love for hockey just because of the pace of the game. I think that's probably what drew me to pitching was, when you play hockey, you step on that ice and you're in the action. Whether you like it or not, you're in it. And I love that part of it. And I think that's what I liked about pitching as well is, you were in the action. Every pitch, you were in the action. So, it was, truth be told, I was a better hockey player coming out of high school than I was a baseball player. I should say that. Maybe not better, but more polished. But I'm not gonna say it was an easy decision, but I think I made the right one.
Well, we want to definitely compare those two, but I also want to ask about Don Sweeney, who's the current GM of the Boston Bruins. And I have to shout out my best friend in the entire world, Alex Parker. He was my best man at my wedding. He's a high school hockey coach, and he was texting me things that you have to ask Tom Glavine about because he was the one who told me. Now, obviously, I knew you were a hockey player, but he said you need to get Tom Glavine on because he's a hockey baseball guy at the finest. So for you were drafted ahead of Don Sweeney, who's now the GM of your team, of the Bruins. You grew up a fan of the Bruins. Do you have run-ins with him at all? Is there kind of a joint camaraderie being part of that draft?
I haven't, but I'll take it a step further. Don Sweeney is single-handedly in the top 5 reasons of why I became a baseball player, and here's why. So when I was playing high school hockey, my junior year, a friend of mine who was a senior who I played hockey with, his brother went to Harvard and was playing lacrosse. And we decided we were going to go into Harvard one night, go to a hockey game. So we went in and I went to the game, and I just fell in love with that arena. I fell in love with the atmosphere. Everything about it was phenomenal. And I went home after that. When we went home after that, I just thought, you know what, that's where I want to go. I want to go there and I want to go play hockey and I want to play baseball, but I want to go there and I want to play hockey. So that was my goal. Now, fast forward to the SATs. SATs were my kryptonite. I was a really, really good student in high school, but my God, I stunk on that test. I just, I took it. I got tutored for a summer. I took it again. I think I maybe gained 50 points. So I was just not very good at it. And as it came down to me trying to figure out where I wanted to go to school, Harvard was at the top of the list. And then I had, I had a couple baseball schools that didn't have hockey, and I had a couple other hockey schools that didn't have baseball. Now it's funny, like here we are 40 years later or whatever it is. And Boston College was recruiting me really hard for hockey, but back then they didn't have baseball. Today that would have been the perfect place to go. You got big time hockey, you got big time baseball, but they didn't have baseball back then, so they were kind of not really on the list. But Anyway, long story short, because I didn't do well on the SAT, I remember I got a call from Coach Cleary, who was the coach at the time, and he called me. He said, "Listen, um, your SATs aren't going to get you in, and I can get one guy in, and I need a defenseman more than I need a center, and that's defenseman was Don Sweeney."
Wow.
So I say all the time, had I gotten into Harvard back in those days, I probably would have gone to school.
Wow.
But as it turned out, I didn't get in, and that made my choice to go to baseball a little bit easier.
Now, Tom,
Wow.
when you were in high school, your nickname, at least for some, was Gretzky because you resembled him in a way. Now, over the years, I should know this, have you met him? Do you know him?
I do. I know him a little bit. I got a chance to play with him, play golf with him one day in LA, probably early 90s, when he was still out there in LA. I think he's still out there, but he was out there. We were playing. I got a chance to play golf with him. And then I've run into him different places here and there. I've run into him a couple times down in West Palm Beach when I've been down there at Michael Jordan's golf course. So I see him from time to time, but I haven't played golf with him since then. But great guy. I mean, just a super guy. Very very unimposing and very down to earth for being the greatest hockey player of all
Yeah,
time.
Tom, I met him at dinner one night at a friend's house, and I was shocked that he wasn't bigger than I thought I mean, I thought he would be bigger than this. He's got a similar build to you, correct? I mean, he's not.
He does. He's not a big guy. I mean, listen, I think that was part of the other reason, when I started looking at, do I want to go play baseball? Do I want to go play hockey? I mean, at that stage of the game, I was maybe 6 feet tall and 175 pounds. So I wasn't exactly the biggest guy on the planet. There was a lot of those guys and a lot of guys who were a lot bigger. And being a left-handed pitcher, I thought, well, that's something I need to take advantage of. And again, I think I made the right decision. But yeah, back in those days, you just didn't have guys that were these, like in every sport, right? Everybody now is just monstrous. They're fast. They do all that stuff. But Wayne in his day, I got a chance to watch him play a couple times live when he came to Boston. And to me, the biggest thing that stood out watching him was that he was always a step or two ahead of everybody else on the ice. Like he knew where he was going before he got the puck. He knew where he was going with the puck before he got the puck. When you have guys like that, they're shifty. They're a little bit tougher to, make solid contact with all the time. But, at the same time, for all those years, he had Marty McSorley that was kind of his right-hand man that was keeping an eye on things for him.
Right. Tom, the Russian hockey coach once described Gretzky as this: you see him, then he disappears, then there's a goal. Is that a perfect description of Wayne Gretzky?
It really is, because like I said, when you watch him play, at least for me, when I watched him play, I wouldn't sit there and say, like, if you took away numbers and names and you didn't know who was who, he wouldn't stand out as being a gifted skater or a great skater or anything like that. Like, you wouldn't notice him because of how he skated. You would notice him because how often he put the puck in the net, and you would notice him because of how often he put the puck on somebody else's stick to put the puck in the net. I mean, he was just a tremendous playmaker. Like I said, he had such vision and anticipation on the ice that to me, I think that's the thing that really stood out for me at that stage when I was still playing a lot and got to see him live was just he's just one of those guys, and it was just incredible to watch him play.
Tom, I heard today if you took away all of Gretzky's goals, he would still have more points than anyone in the history of the NHL. Is that possible?
Well, I mean, probably. I mean, those are those crazy stats that you hear sometimes, right? I mean, I forget what was. There's a similar one like with Hank Aaron, right? If you took away all his home runs, he still would have had 3,000 hits or something crazy. I don't know.
Correct. That is correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's those are the reasons why those guys are talked about amongst the greatest of all time to ever play their sport, and we were fortunate enough to get to see him play.
And Tom, are you watching NHL playoff games every night now? And are you mesmerized them like most great hockey fans are?
I try to watch something every night. I mean, it's a little tough with my Bruins not being in there, so I'm not as invested. But usually if the Celtics aren't on, I'm watching a playoff hockey game right now. Yes, I might skip over and watch a little bit of a baseball game. Obviously the Braves because
Right.
I still broadcast for them, so I got to keep up with it a little bit.
Sure.
But hockey's generally on in my house. Yes.
When's the last time you played in a hockey game? Like where you actually put the skates on and there was someone against you?
It's probably I've been down here in Florida now for 5 years full time, so it's been since then. When I was in Atlanta, I was still skating twice a week. We have where my boys played hockey. We had a bunch of guys who coached we had a couple guys that played professionally. We had a lot of guys that played in college. We had a lot of kids in our program that came through and went on to play college. So they would come back and play in the summer. So I was playing a couple of days a week. And, in the summertime, when those kids come back, I would kind of disappear because, when you're working as hard as you can not to be the worst guy on the ice, kind of gets, and those kids are so fast. It's just like, my God, I can't do this. And my brain works, my hands kind of work, but my feet, not going so fast anymore. So it's been about 5 years, but I loved it. I mean, it was great exercise, number one, but number two is just, that I think the biggest thing we all miss when we get done playing is that locker room camaraderie. So when you have an opportunity to do it like I did and just get in the locker room with the guys and goof around and have some fun and in a stress-free environment, it was a lot of fun.
Tom, we ask a lot of stupid hypothetical questions on this podcast.
That's fair. I probably have a lot of stupid hypothetical answers.
All right,
so good.
You're what, 59 years old?
Yes.
If we gave you 10 penalty shots right now against an NHL goalie, how many times are you going to score out of 10 against an NHL goalie?
I think I would say on a good day, I would maybe score once. I mean, listen, it's, you watch those things on TV and you see shootouts and breakaways and whatnot. And you think to yourself, my God, how can you not score? But those goalies are so big. They're so athletic. They spend so much time studying guys' moves nowadays. And that's the one thing I don't understand is when, 9 out of 10 times when guys do shootouts, it's that slow meandering, we come down and, whatever. And the success rate doesn't seem great, but then there's a breakaway in a game and a guy's going down the ice full speed because somebody's chasing them and they're trying to hurry up and get a shot off. There seems to be more success. So I'm not sure why guys don't pick up the pace a little bit more when they do shootouts, but that's somebody else's problem, not mine.
Right. Tom, you're a left-handed pitcher, left-handed hitter. Are you a left-handed shooter in hockey?
I am. I was left-handed across the board. I do a couple things right-handed. If I were to shoot a gun or a rifle, I shoot with my right hand, which is weird. I guess it has to do, I think my right eye is my dominant eye, so I think it has something to do with that. But then others like when I play tennis or ping pong, I'm actually ambidextrous. I don't backhand. I switch hands, which is kind of goofy. But so yeah, it's funny. I think having been a left-handed thrower and catching with my right hand, I feel there's a lot of things that I feel really comfortable doing with my right hand because of that catching mechanism of it. But I think generally anything that has to do with the strength component ends up being more my left hand.
Okay, this is 25 years ago, and Tom, I know you don't remember this. John Smoltz runs out of the clubhouse. We're in the clubhouse. He runs out of the trainer's room in Miami, and he comes up to me, and he says, I know I have walked more times as a hitter than any active pitcher. And he looks at me, and he goes, you're one of those guys that can look this stuff up. He goes, and this is the only thing that's important to John Smoltz at the moment. So yes. I make a couple calls, and as it turns out, yes, he had the most walks as a hitter among active pitchers. And he was the happiest man in the world. This does not surprise you, that story,
Right.
correct?
No, right. Correct. Does not surprise me whatsoever. No.
Because John is the most competitive person you've ever met.
He 100% is. John will bet on whether or not the sun's coming up tomorrow. So yeah, I think it's part of what makes him great. There's he's one of those guys that if you challenge him to do something, he's going to take the challenge, because I don't think there's anything that he doesn't think he can do and do it well. And it's hard to argue with him. He's obviously great at a lot of things. So I'm not. If that was the most important thing to John at the moment, that I'm not the least bit surprised that it then became the most important thing to somebody else at the moment too. So you had to go find the answer.
Right. So I did. So the other answer is that since he went to the bullpen, you went on to have the most walks, 101, of any pitcher, at least since 1980. And it's really not even close. So explain.
There you go, John.
Right. You're way ahead of Smoltz. Yeah. Make sure you remind him of that.
I 100% will. Yeah.
But Tom, 101 walks. I mean, this was what made that Braves pitching staff so great. You, Maddux, Smoltz, and the others. You hit your position, you fielded your position, and you walked 101 times. What was your thinking as a hitter that I got to get on base here?
Well, Tim, back in those days, strikeouts did matter.
Right.
So, we were trying not to strike out. But I think it was just the kind of a mindset that we had, right? I mean, I think our goal obviously was, we have to be able to lay down a bunt, right? That was the most important thing you had to do as a starting pitcher with a bat in your hand. And I think that was something we all worked tremendously hard at. We had to give a lot of credit back in those days to the late great Jimmy Williams. He spent so much time with all of us. In the batting cage. Like it was pretty mandatory that, it got to a point where Bobby really created an extra group of batting practice for the pitchers, because Bobby was so different than any other manager when it came to how he treated pitchers. Like he had a general liking of pitchers, whereas so many other managers detested pitchers. So Bobby did everything he could to make us better, to protect us, to do all those things. And he knew how much we enjoyed hitting. So we hit batting practice every day, and then Jimmy would take us in the cage twice in between starts, and we would work on bunting, we would work on contact, all those things. So I think it got to the point where we actually felt pretty good about what we were doing, and we took some pride in it. But like I said, first and foremost, you have to be able to lay down a bunt. There's no excuse for that, right? I always felt like, okay, I'm going to give Bobby 101 reasons to take me out of a game because of the way I'm pitching. I'll be damned if he's taking me out in the seventh inning of a tie game with a runner on first because I can't lay down a bunt. So that was just not going to be part of the equation. But beyond that, I think it was, if we got some hits, that was great. But I think we just didn't want to be an automatic out. Like we wanted to make that opposing pitcher have to work a little bit to get us out. So I know that was my philosophy. And listen, I was more of a slap hitter, obviously, so it was a little bit easier for me to kind of wait a little bit and see where a pitch was and maybe slap it and play or foul it off or that kind of stuff. But I think more than anything else, it was just, I think the three of us, not surprisingly to anybody, were just really proud of every aspect of our game, and we worked hard to be good at it.
Tom, you hit one career home run. Do you remember who it was off, and you remember the whole situation?
I do, yeah. It was a tie game. John Smiley was on the mound. I took him opposite field at Fulton County Stadium. So I didn't really get a chance to enjoy all of it because when I hit it, I knew I hit it good. It was going to be a double. So I was sprinting to get to second base. I was not blessed with the greatest of foot speed. So I was running hard to get to second base. And then I remember looking up and I was like, oh my God, that went over the fence. So I kind of had to try to break it down a little bit, but I didn't. I kind of had more of the Scott Rowland home run trot. I was around the bases before I knew it, and everything was great and exciting. And I remember everybody's high-fiving me, and I'm enjoying it. And then I remember at some point in time, I sat down on the bench and it was like, oh crap, it's a 2-1 game. I got to go back out and pitch. So I kind of had to check myself a little bit and check my emotions and kind of get back into pitching mode. So I didn't have a ton of chance to enjoy it, but it was pretty cool.
Yeah, you pitched 8 innings, only giving up 1 run in that game. And ultimately it was a walk-off win, 2-1. So your home run tied the game. And I never want to blame official scorers, but I think Tom Glavine deserves the win in that game. He pitches 8 innings, gives up only 1 run, hits a home run to tie the game in the 6th inning, and doesn't even get the win. I don't know if I can protest this many years later, 30 years later, but maybe I'll try.
Yeah, I mean, what else are you supposed to do? I mean, just out of niceness, I guess they should have given me the win.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Tom, you brought up Bobby Cox, how great he was to the pitchers. He was even better to the position players. Are you aware of the story that Jeff Francoeur told us on this podcast last year when Frenchie got to play golf with Tiger Woods for the first time? Do you know that story?
I think so. You have to remind me because I think Jeff might have told it to me.
I'm going to tell it real quickly. So Frenchie's got a chance to play with Tiger Woods. Frenchie's 22 years old. Bobby sees him before the game stretching and says, I understand you have a chance to play with Tiger today. And Frenchie goes, yeah. And he goes, but I'm not going to go play. I need to stay here and play baseball. And Bobby says, all right, I'll make a deal with you. If you go to Bradenton in 3 days, where Chipper and all those guys hate to go, just we'll let you bat 1 time, run through first base, pretend that you hurt something, we'll get you out of the game, and you can go play with Tiger Woods, which is exactly what happened. He played 27 with Tiger. And then, as Frenchie told us, at 4:30 in the afternoon, Frenchie's wife calls him and says, there's something on the wire that you have a high ankle sprain, when he faked the whole thing because Bobby allowed him. But Tom, that's why Bobby was such a great manager, because of stories like that. Am I right?
No, that's what made him so great. And I mean, there's so many of those stories. I know there was, Smoltz probably told you one too, where, Tiger called him and said, hey, I want to go play a couple practice rounds at Augusta to get ready for the tournament. You think you can come with me and play? And he's like, Tiger, I'm in spring training. Bobby's not going to let me leave for a day. And then he said, well, let me ask him. Well, sure enough, Bobby let him go. So I think he practiced in the morning, flew to Augusta with Tiger that afternoon, played the next morning, and was back in practice a day later. So, I mean, Bobby was that way. I mean, listen, when we would go on road trips, the first thing every one of us did was pack our golf clubs, and then we packed our clothes. And every single day on the road, you'd come in, and the first one there would be Bobby's. Like, where'd you guys play today? How was the course? Who won the money? Who did it? I mean, he just, he was such a fan of everything that we did, but I think he understood, at least for us, that what a release it was for us from the game. Right. I mean, listen, I don't think people understand sometimes the grind of a baseball season. I mean, it's a long year. When you talk about starting in February and you go to October, and there's so many ups and downs personally with what you're doing, and the psychology that goes along with that, the injuries that come up and what have you. I think every one of us will tell you, I don't know if I can quantify the number, but there's no question it added to the longevity of our careers. No question about it, because it got us out of the hotel room. I loved playing golf the day after I pitch, good or bad, because, no matter how I felt physically, I always felt better after I got done playing golf. I felt looser. There were days where I would wake up and think, oh my God, my shoulder's killing or my elbow's killing, something hurts. And then you get done and you're like, I don't feel so bad anymore. So, it added so much, but I think at the end of the day, Bobby knew he could trust us. He knew that us playing golf was never going to get in the way of what we had to do. And in spring training, we would all be at the ballpark at 6:00 in the morning, and we'd get our workout in the morning and do what we had to do before we went on the field. And then we'd go practice. And when practice was over, we were gone. We went to the golf course, and it was, 27 holes at least every day in spring training. So, it was a big part of what we did. It was a big part of the three of us, our camaraderie. And, as much as you say, well, it kind of gets you away from baseball, I'm going to say at least 50% of our conversations on the golf course were about baseball,
right?
Whether who we just played or who we're getting ready to play, or, hey, doggy, how do you get this guy out? Or, what do you guys think about me pitching against this guy like that? I mean, it was inevitably we talked baseball, so we didn't get completely away from it, but it was a good outlet for us. But
Dad, imagine.
Bobby was so good. I mean, listen, I can't sit here and tell you that anybody in uniform in the dugout on any given night cared about winning any more than Bobby did. I mean, he just did, and everybody knew he was going to fight tooth and nail. One of my favorite stories, I tell it all the time, was we convinced Bobby that there were so many things that we needed to do as pitchers because it was better for us, and he just went along with it. Back in those days, we used to keep the pitching chart, and so the next day's starting pitcher would keep score of the game, and he would write down every pitch and the outcome and all that stuff. And it was generally for the pitching coach to count pitches and track pitches and all that stuff. That everything they did manually back in those days, it's all automated and digital nowadays. But anyway, we convinced Bobby that it would be much easier for us starting pitchers to stay in the clubhouse and watch the game on the TV and chart the pitches because you can see location better. It's hard to see from the dugout. So it wasn't completely a lie, but it was more so we could just sit in the clubhouse and sit in our underwear and maybe order a pizza and watch the game. And, if we had to get dressed to pinch hit or pinch run, we could do it. But generally, we were just kind of kicking back because tomorrow's our next day to pitch. So anyway, Maddux was doing the chart one night, and there was a lot of bickering back and forth about the umpiring and whatever. So I went up like in the third inning and to get a cup of coffee. And I was like, hey, doggy. I was like, what's this umpire? How's he doing back there? I said, everybody's bitching and complaining. And I said, he's like, well, he said he's not bad. He said he's missed a few pitches here and there, but he's kind of been consistent on both sides. He's missed, a couple on both sides, but really he hasn't been that bad. I was like, okay. Sure enough, Bobby comes up right behind me to get a cup of coffee. And he says, Greg, he says, how's this umpire been? And Doggy did not skip a beat. He said, Bobby, he's terrible. He's missed so many calls. He's missed so many calls for us. And he's going on and on and on. And Bobby's like, okay. And he walks out. I was like, Doggy, what are you doing? He's like, what? I said, he's going to go downstairs and he's going to get thrown out of this game. You know that. He's like, I know. He went downstairs, and sure enough, that next half inning, there was a close pitch. And I'm not sure half the time Bobby even was watching because he would get there in the dugout and then have his readers, hanging down his face like this, looking at his lineup card, trying to think, okay, who do I have in the bullpen? What am I? And he wouldn't. And if somebody in the dugout said something about a pitch, he would snap in. And he would. So sure enough, somebody said something about a pitch, and he jumped up on the first step of the dugout. And you're awful. You've been terrible all night long. And I'm sure he got tossed. So I was like, well, that was no surprise.
Tom, as far as Maddux goes, as far as being like the greatest pitcher most people have ever seen, have you ever met anyone quite like Greg Maddux in your life when it comes to analytical nature, understanding of things, being mischievous and everything else? Have you ever met anyone like Maddux?
No, I haven't. And obviously, look at one of the great things about so many of the guys that you get a chance to play with over the years is, you really get a sense to watch guys and see what makes guys tick and what makes them who they are. And everybody can't do it the same way, right? I remember having a conversation one night with Smoltz. I pitched the game in New York, and it was my typical game. I don't know, 7-8 innings and good results, and barely looked like I cracked a sweat. And we were driving somewhere to a golf course that night to play the next day. And he's like, Glavine, you drive me crazy. You go out there, it's like you're just playing catch. You don't even break a sweat. And I'm like, John, I said, listen, I don't throw as hard as you, but trust me, I'm working hard out there. I mean, I know it's not the same hard work as you do, or it doesn't look like it, but I said, trust me, it's all I got. Because I'm going to go out there in my next start, and I'm going to pitch like you. I'm just going to throw fastballs in there and throw some changeups and do this. Well, he did. He tried it, and he got killed. And, and he's like, okay, that didn't work. And, I've had the same thing. I played with Pedro in New York, and I was so envious of how he was able to go out there and just pitch like he was pitching in a men's league game on a Sunday afternoon and just had the greatest time. And was laughing and cutting up and doing this and doing that. And it's just, I was like, I can't do that. I can't pitch that way. And, I think Greg was the same way. He had his things about him, but he was so smart about what was going on during the course of the game, and he was so smart about how he was going to attack a lineup. I think sometimes he would like to give you the impression that he didn't really know what his stats were or what he needed to do this or do that. He knew exactly what he needed to do to achieve certain things. But, I think that was on the lighter side of it. I mean, he was really, when I first got to the big leagues, I was around some older guys, and probably one of the smartest guys I was ever around, even throughout my career, was Teddy Simmons. And to sit down with Teddy and talk about pitching and how to go about getting out hitters was something special. And Greg was along those lines too. When he came over to play with us at that stage of the game, my game plan was not very complicated. I knew what I did and I knew what I was good at, and that was the foundation. And I didn't make a ton of adjustments during the course of the game. And it was really then that Greg came over and we would start having conversations during the game, and he'd be like, see how that hitter took that pitch, man, he would have so much more room to throw that pitch inside, or he fouled that pitch off and it was 6 inches off the plate. He can't do that. He can't be able to do that. He's got to pitch him inside. And it really started to open my eyes to where, okay, well, yeah, maybe I should pay attention to how a hitter looks at a pitch, or how a hitter fouls a pitch off. And, that was really the first time I started thinking that way. But, he was so good at it. He was so good at dissecting the hitter and just knowing what guys were trying to do and what he was going to do to them, and that whole cat and mouse game. But, yeah, he was super smart, but also extremely sick, which kind of is what made him a lot of fun.
So,
Tom, to that end, Jeff, Leo Mazzoni once told me that Maddux came in after an inning and said, how many pitches have I thrown so far? And Leo looks and says 83, and Maddux goes 84. Like, he knew. Tom,
Yeah.
That's him, right?
Yeah. That's 100% him. Yeah, and that's Leo too. Leo was not against missing a few pitches on the little clicker every now and then. Because I do the same. I'm like, Leo, how many I'd be at? And be like, you got like 85, and I'm like, BS. I've thrown at least 100 in this game. So he was not above doing that every now and then.
Tom, one of my favorite things I've ever seen, and you saw it when Maddux dressed up as the camera guy and then ended up throwing BP to Chris Bryant. It's one of the greatest things I've ever seen. Do you agree with that?
100%. I mean, if you haven't seen it, you need to go look at it. And I think it speaks to how Greg is, right? That was so willing to do that, and just able to go out there on a whim and do what he did. I mean, it was one of the best pranks of all time, no question
Jeff,
about it.
do you know what we're talking about here? Oh, it was.
Yeah.
And Brian kept saying, the camera guy's got good stuff.
Yeah, at one point in time, I said, this camera guy's got a pretty good breaking ball.
Oh, it's great. It's up there with the Kyrie Irving, Uncle Drew, those kind of sketches are so good. Sure. Now, Tom, speaking of Greg Maddux and Bobby Cox, all three of you inducted into the Hall of Fame in the same year. So neat. I love looking at Hall of Fame classes as they go in together. John Smoltz obviously joined you the next year. For you guys, did you, probably not that weekend because you're so busy, but were you able to kind of reunite those golf days in Cooperstown at some point as Hall of Famers?
Yeah, we have more so now. That year that you go in, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's almost like your wedding weekend, right? I mean, that's the magnitude of the party you're planning. And, between guest lists and getting housing for everybody and doing all that stuff, it's a pretty stressful time. And then when you get there, you kind of hit the ground running, doing stuff and obligations as an inductee, and then your family's there. So you're trying to get to go see all of them. So it's a crazy, crazy weekend, but, I think the same, everybody there said the same thing, enjoy this weekend, get through this weekend. When you come back after this weekend, it's way more fun. And it's true, because you're not the guy, you're nice and relaxed. You don't have a ton of commitment. So, these subsequent years, yeah, we play a ton of golf. We usually all get in there, at least on Wednesday, if not Thursday. And, we'll play golf Friday, Saturday. We play golf the morning of induction. And I mean, it's just a great weekend. And, you talk about one of the greatest fraternities of all time to be a part of. I mean, I still go there at times and will, see somebody that was the generation before me that I watched on TV, and it's still hard for me to put myself there with those guys. It's I don't want to say it's easy because you never thought you were going to be there in the first place, but it's a little bit easier to put yourself uh, in Cooperstown with your contemporaries. But when you start looking at guys that you watched on TV or guys even before that, and you walk through, the plaque room and you're looking at, Ty Cobb and Babe Ruth and all these guys. I mean, it's just unbelievable to be in there and be a part of all those conversations.
Tom, who is that one Hall of Famer that when you finally got a chance to meet them face to face, you were almost too stunned to speak? You acted like the rest of us.
There were probably a couple. Hearing all the stories, I'm not going to lie, I was a little intimidated when I met Bob Gibson. You just don't know if he's going to want to fight you, right? But I say that kiddingly. He ended up being just a sweet gentleman of a guy, I mean, just a super nice guy, not the persona you would expect whatsoever from what you saw out on the baseball field. But, I don't know. I mean, growing up in Boston, first time I went up there and met Carlton Fisk, that was pretty cool. Although I think my wife was more excited about that than I was. But he was great to meet. But, Johnny Bench, Johnny Bench is the unofficial ambassador for the weekend. Like, he's the guy that, really takes the time to come around and see you and takes a ton of pictures of you and your family and everybody that's there. And he's the guy that, before you take the Hall of Fame picture and have the Hall of Fame dinner after everything, he sits you down in the rocking chair on the back deck and kind of has the conversation with you about what it means to be a Hall of Famer and all that stuff. So, I don't know. I mean, I can't put my finger on one guy, but, it's a pretty cool, and I know that's a lame way to explain it, but it's just a really cool thing to be a part of and see all those great players in one place and have some of the conversations you end up having.
All right, Tom. All right, we could keep you for hours. I'm going to ask you one more question, and this is important because it drives me crazy when we specialize with our kids today and we're telling a 10-year-old you're only going to play baseball like for the rest of your life. How much did hockey make you a better baseball player? And how much did baseball make you a better hockey player?
I would say it's hard to quantify, but a lot, I mean, I think in general, it just made me a better athlete, and I think to me, that's the one thing I look at so much in today's game, where, guys are bigger and faster and stronger and all those things, but I'm not sure that they're any better athletes than the guys that I played with, right? Like, I don't know how many guys in a major league rotation now hit third or fourth in their high school lineups, played another position, played another sport at a high level. It's the generation, particularly with pitchers, of, pitcher only. That's all these guys are doing, I can't tell you how much playing baseball and playing another position and hitting helped me with my pitching, because it's another perspective on, this is what this guy's trying to do to me. And you can't help but think, well, what if I tried to do that to somebody? How would, what if I incorporated that? I mean, you just see it differently. So, I mean, it's funny to me because if you go to, I guarantee you, I know it's probably close to 99 or 100% in baseball. I don't know how it is with other sports, but if you go around and ask any professional baseball player, hey, are you on board with having your kid play, one sport only at the age of 10? That I'll tell you, no, you're crazy.
Right.
Yet that's what everybody else does,
Yeah.
And it just drives me nuts. And I think that, I think there's a time, that you have to, particularly like for me up north, it was never an issue because hockey and baseball only when I got to high school, it was maybe a week overlap. And that was only because we my junior and senior year, we got deep enough into the state tournament that baseball had already started. So, like that first week or two of baseball, I would go to the gym during a study hall or my lunch period, and I would throw bullpens, and that's how I got ready for baseball season. And then when hockey was over, I was on the baseball field the next day. So there wasn't a ton of overlap. I can see it in the South. It's a little bit harder, particularly if kids are playing football and baseball, because we all know how football coaches can be, that the only thing that matters in life is football. So that can get a little bit difficult, but I am just such a huge believer, particularly at a young age. Let kids experience every sport that they can. If you get a kid that just doesn't like anything else and he only wants to play one sport, okay, that's one thing. But this notion that you're forcing your kid, or your kid's being forced to play year round, because like I've said so often, somebody's telling you that, hey, if Johnny's not playing year round, Joey down the end of the street is, and he's going to get better than your boy. And you need to do something about it. Like, what parent's not going to do something about it, right? I mean, and I think that's part of the problem, is so many of these sports coaches, organizations feed on the emotions of the parent. And every parent wants to give their kid the best opportunity, right? And most parents don't know enough to say, well, no, my kid's not going to do that. He's going to play other sports. I just think it's become a completely unfortunate situation. But at the end of the day, I just think we're raising a lot of sport-specific athletes, but not overall good athletes.
Right, Tom, I got to follow up on this about throwing a bullpen during your lunchtime. You and Maddux and the rest of your guys threw a bullpen in between starts every time. And you guys never, you and Maddux especially, never got hurt. That cannot be a coincidence, correct?
No, I don't think it is. Listen, I always equated it with, listen, if you're a marathon runner, you train by running, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you do. And I think as a pitcher, more times than not, guys get hurt because they don't throw enough or they throw improperly, right? I mean, I had two instances in my career. When I first signed and I went and played with the Braves, I was in a, sorry, my dog's barking at somebody. I got into rotation, and in high school, I didn't throw bullpens. I pitched and I played center field. So I never threw a bullpen. And when I went to play pro ball, now all of a sudden I'm pitching every 5 days, and I wasn't conditioned to do it. And my arm hurt. And I remember going to my manager down there in rookie ball, and I was like, hey, something's wrong with my arm. My arm hurts. We need to do something. And I remember him saying, hang tight. Let me make a phone call. And he came to me the next day and he said, okay, Johnny Sain's coming down and he's going to work with you for the next 10 days. I was like, okay. I knew who Johnny Sain was, but I didn't know much about Johnny Sain. And I remember Johnny came down. He said, okay, your arm hurts. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to throw every day for 10 days. And then after 10 days, we're going to see where you're at. And I was like, what? My arm hurts, right? So I did. I played catch every day for 10 days, mixed in some long toss. And at the end of 10 days, I got on the mound and I threw a bullpen. And then after that, I never skipped a beat the rest of that season. I was fine. And when Bobby came to the big leagues to manage and he brought Leo as our pitching coach, I remember that was one of the first conversations I had with Leo. He said, okay, we're gonna throw more. We're gonna throw twice in between starts. I was like, Leo, my arm's killing me, because I was kind of on that standard. You throw, you take a day off, you throw a marathon bullpen, you take 2 days off, and then you go pitch. And, looking back at it, it was like, well, no wonder my arm hurt. I would throw 100 pitches, take a day off. I'd probably throw 70 in a bullpen, take 2 days off and pitch. I never gave myself any recovery time, right? And I think the greatest thing there were a couple of things that were really good about it. I think that first and foremost, getting on the mound more often is where I learned my mechanics, and I really learned how to repeat my mechanics, to the point where I could become my own pitching coach, and that's one thing I always try to tell kids that are pitching when they ask me about it, pitching or advice or whatever. I'm like, listen, the sooner you can learn your mechanics and become your own coach, the better off you're going to be. And once I learned how to do that, that's when I really started to take off, because I could make adjustments from hitter to hitter. I didn't if I was waiting for Leo to come out and tell me what I was doing wrong, usually it was bases were loaded, nobody out. And it's like, well, maybe I should avoid this, So, I learned how to do that. But I think what it really taught me how to do was how to pitch, because I maintain, and I still say it with watching today's game. When you go out there on the mound and you're jacked up and your adrenaline's going and you're pitching at 95, 100% effort level, it's easy to make the ball do what you want to do, right? But in those bullpens where we had to regulate our effort, because if you're going to throw twice in between starts, you have to watch A, how hard you're throwing, and B, how many pitches you're throwing. When you're over there throwing a bullpen at 65% effort level and you can still make your sinker sink and make your changeup sink and make your curveball curve and spin the ball the way you want to at that effort level, God, it was so much easier once you got into a game to do that, But that's where we learned what we called feel and touch. Like I learned how to have some feel and some touch on my pitches so that when I get in a game, it was a lot easier to do. But like I said, I think the most important thing was you had to regulate. You had to regulate your effort, and you had to regulate what you were going to try and do. I mean, there were many a times where, I walked over there in a bullpen. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have my fastball, my changeup, my curveball, my slider. They're all going to be great, whatever. And after about 25 pitches and my slider stunk, you got to walk away. Because if you think you're going to get all four of them going every time you get out there, that's when you're going to get hurt. So, you had to be smart about it. But I really think that was a godsend for me, because most importantly, it taught me to learn my mechanics and learn how to have some feel on the baseball. But I think it made me healthier, no question about it.
Tom, you mentioned players today are stronger than ever before, but strength, as we all know, is relative. I don't think the longevity is there. 22-year career, 10-time All-Star, Hall of Fame pitcher. We just aren't seeing that as much. And this is a great testament to our kids who love this game, to our coaches who love these kids who love this game, is longevity beats strength. But the game has changed so much. Dad, you know this better than anybody. Tom, you know this. I just think it's the perspective. I'm just going to school with learning how you made it to this great career and how much the game has changed. I can't thank you enough for your time today. This was fascinating. Fascinating.
Well, listen, happy to do it. I'd be happy to come back anytime. I enjoyed talking with you guys, and it was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, Tom. What's your dog's name, by the way?
That was Brutus, named after the Ohio State Buckeyes. Yes. So both of my boys were big Ohio State fans. So Brutus is our resident tough guy.
And what kind of dog is he?
He's a German Shepherd.
Oh,
he's very intimidating looking, yes. So, but I think his bark is worse than his bite, but I wouldn't tell you to try and find out.
Right. All right. Well, Tom, thank you so much for educating us about baseball, about golf, and especially about hockey. We're going to watch the game a little differently now because you educated us. It was so, so good. Thanks again. We'll see you soon, okay?
All right. You guys take care. All the best.
Thank you to Tom Glavine. A fascinating time with him on Is This a Great Game or What? Dad, you asked him, and I knew you were going to ask this question. In my soul, I knew you were going to ask him, if you were on skates right now up against an NHL goalie, how many would you score? He said maybe one, and pretty confident in the maybe one, Dad. Now, respectfully, you and I are terrible skaters, awful. Do you think you could skate from one end of the ice to the other without falling?
Jeff,
No
I've only
handles.
been on skates twice. It was a complete disaster both times. No, I could never skate from one end of the rink to the other. Look, I'm going to tell you, I am 100% confident in all things when I've got my feet on the ground. When you take my feet off the ground, skiing, roller skating, ice skating, anything like that, I am completely lost, and I'm not apologizing for that. Anyone who can skate, to me, is a magician if you can do that. And when you play in the NHL like he could have, and like the NHL playoffs are going on now, that is just breathtaking to watch.
Tom Glavine, a big shout out and a thank you for being our guest this week on Is This a Great Game or What? And for all of you for listening, thank you. Make sure to subscribe, share with friends and family, and as always, thank you for being a part of our family.